My name is Sienna and I'm 28. Christmas morning, I watched my sister unwrap a brand new BMW with a giant red bow while I got $2 socks with the price tag still attached. My mother laughed and said, "Be humble. Each one receives what they deserve." At 2 o'clock in the morning, I packed my bags and left them a Christmas present they'd never forget. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely taken for granted by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back to how this whole mess started because trust me, this story gets better. 3 years ago, I landed my dream job as a marketing director at a growing tech startup. The salary was incredible, more money than I'd ever imagined making at 25. When I called home with the news, my parents threw a celebration dinner complete with Dad's famous barbecue ribs and Mom's apple pie. "We're so proud of you, honey," Mom said, beaming as she cut generous slices of pie. All those years of hard work finally paying off. Dad raised his beer bottle in a toast. "To our successful daughter, you've always been the responsible one." Even my sister Emma, usually glued to her phone, looked up long enough to congratulate me. "That's awesome, Sienna. Maybe now you can finally get a decent car." She wasn't wrong. I'd been driving the same Honda Civic since college, a reliable little car, but with 150,000 miles and a passenger door that stuck in winter. I'd been dreaming of upgrading for years. But then came the conversation that would change everything. "Honey," Mom started as we cleared the dishes, her voice taking on that careful tone I'd learned to recognize. "Now that you're doing so well financially, we were hoping you might be able to help us with something temporary." The restaurant business had been hit hard during the pandemic, Dad explained. They'd fallen behind on the mortgage payments and were facing some serious late fees. "Just until we get back on our feet," he promised. "Maybe 6 months at most." I didn't hesitate. These were my parents, the people who'd raised me, put me through college, supported my dreams. Of course, I'd help them through a rough patch. That's what family does, right? "How much do you need?" I asked. "Well, the mortgage payment is $1,400 a month," Mom said. "If you could help with that temporarily, we could catch up on the back payments with the restaurant income." $1,400. It was a chunk of my new salary, but definitely manageable. I set up an automatic transfer that very week. Problem solved. Family crisis averted. Except it wasn't temporary. 6 months came and went with no mention of resuming the payments themselves. A year passed, then 2 years, then 3. The temporary help had quietly become permanent. And somehow nobody ever brought up the fact that I was still paying their mortgage. Meanwhile, the restaurant seemed to be doing fine. Dad bought new equipment for the kitchen. Mom redecorated the dining room. They talked about business being good, customers returning, profits increasing, but the automatic transfer kept going out every month like clockwork. And here's the thing. Nobody mentioned I wasn't just paying their mortgage. I was paying my own mortgage, too. 2 mortgage payments every month, plus my own bills, plus the occasional emergency request when Dad needed dental work or Mom's car needed repairs. Do you know what it's like to live on half your salary while everyone around you thinks you're financially comfortable? Because I sure learned living on half my income while paying 2 mortgages wasn't exactly the glamorous lifestyle you'd expect from a successful marketing director. While my coworkers talked about weekend trips to wine country and their latest shopping sprees, I was calculating whether I could afford groceries and gas for the week. The Honda Civic that Emma had joked about still my faithful companion 3 years later. Every time I walked through a car dealership lot, which I did occasionally just to torture myself, I'd run the numbers in my head. Could I afford the monthly payment on something newer? Maybe if I stopped paying my parents' mortgage. But that conversation never seemed to come up at family dinners. Instead, I'd listen to updates about the restaurant's success. "Best quarter we've had in 5 years, Dad would announce proudly. "We're thinking about expanding the patio for next summer." Expanding the patio. With what money, I wondered, since they apparently couldn't afford their own mortgage payment. Meanwhile, my apartment remained furnished with the same college-era furniture I'd bought secondhand. My friends were buying houses, taking vacations, building their lives, and I was building their lives, too. I was apparently. Don't get me wrong, I love my family, but there's something particularly soul-crushing about watching your parents plan home improvements with money they don't have while you eat ramen noodles to stretch your grocery budget. The worst part, I'd started to feel guilty about wanting things for myself. When I caught myself browsing new cars online, I'd remember the automatic transfer going out next week and close the browser. When friends invited me on trips I couldn't afford, I'd make excuses about being busy with work. Emma, meanwhile, seemed to be thriving. Fresh out of college with a part-time retail job that barely covered her gas money, but somehow always dressed in new clothes, going to concerts, taking weekend trips with friends. Her Instagram was a constant stream of brunch photos and shopping hauls. How does she afford all that? I asked Mom during one of our weekly phone calls. Oh, you know, Emma. She's always been good at finding deals. Plus, she's young and single. No real responsibilities yet. No real responsibilities. Unlike me apparently who'd somehow inherited the responsibility of keeping the family financially afloat. The breaking point almost came last spring when my air conditioning died during a heat wave. The repair estimate was $800. Money I didn't have because I'd just sent $1,400 to my parents and paid my own mortgage. I spent 3 days sweating in my apartment, working from home with fans blowing hot air around before finally putting the repair on a credit card. Meanwhile, Dad posted pictures on Facebook of the new flat-screen TV they'd bought for the restaurant's bar area. I stared at that post for probably 10 minutes, doing mental math. New TV for the restaurant, probably $1,500. My air conditioning repair, $800 I had to put on credit. Something was very wrong with this picture, but every time I thought about bringing it up, about asking when they planned to resume their mortgage payments, Mom would mention how proud they were of my success, how grateful they were to have such a responsible daughter, how lucky they felt that I was doing so well and could help family when needed. The guilt was suffocating. Here I was earning more money than I'd ever dreamed of, and I was complaining about helping my parents keep their home. What kind of selfish daughter was I? So, I kept quiet, kept sending the money, kept living like a broke college student while everyone around me prospered. Christmas was coming, and like every year, I'd saved up to buy nice presents for everyone. It was my one splurge, making sure my family had a beautiful Christmas, even if it meant eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch the rest of January. I had no idea that this Christmas would finally show me exactly what my family thought I deserved in return. Christmas Eve found me driving to my parents' house with the trunk full of carefully chosen gifts, my bank account considerably lighter, and that familiar mix of excitement and financial anxiety that had become my holiday tradition. I'd spent weeks finding the perfect presents. A cashmere scarf for Mom from her favorite boutique, $200 that made me wheeze, but her face would light up. A leather messenger bag for Dad. Handcrafted genuine Italian leather, $150 for Emma, a complete skincare set from that expensive brand she'd been posting about on Instagram, another $120. Meanwhile, I'd wrapped their gifts in discount wrapping paper from the dollar store and hoped they wouldn't notice the difference. Because apparently that's what paying 2 mortgages does to your gift wrapping budget. The house looked absolutely magical when I pulled into the driveway. Every window outlined in twinkling lights, a massive wreath on the front door, and what looked like a professional light display in the front yard. Dad had really gone all out this year. Sienna. Mom hugged me tight, wearing a gorgeous red dress I'd never seen before. Probably cost more than my last 3 outfits combined, but who's counting? We're so excited for tomorrow. Emma's been practically bouncing off the walls. The living room was a Christmas card come to life. The tree had to be at least 8 foot tall, decorated with what looked like all new ornaments in a coordinated gold and silver theme. Underneath, presents were arranged in perfect little clusters, all wrapped in expensive-looking paper with elaborate bows. Everything screamed money, the kind of money my parents supposedly didn't have for their mortgage payments. Wow, I said, taking in the scene. You guys really outdid yourselves this year. Well, Dad said, pouring himself a generous glass of what looked like top-shelf whiskey. It's been a good year for the business. We wanted to make this Christmas special. A good year for the business while I paid their mortgage. Interesting math there, Dad. Emma bounced down the stairs in designer pajamas, the kind that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Sienna, did you see the garage? The garage. Dad's been working on something super secret out there for weeks. He won't let anyone look, but I heard him on the phone with a dealership yesterday talking about final paperwork and delivery dates. A dealership? My stomach dropped faster than my savings account balance. You didn't, I said to Dad, trying to keep my voice light. He grinned like a kid with a secret. Let's just say tomorrow is going to be very exciting for a certain young lady. Emma squealed and clapped her hands. I can't believe you might have actually done it. I smiled and nodded along. But inside, warning bells were ringing louder than Christmas carols. If they were buying Emma a car from a dealership, not some used beater, where exactly was that money coming from? The same parents who needed me to cover their mortgage were making major purchases. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom that hadn't been redecorated since high school, I stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the numbers. New Christmas decorations, expensive wrapping paper, mom's new dress, dad's top-shelf liquor, and now possibly a car for Emma. Either business was a lot better than they were letting on, or they'd gotten so comfortable with my mortgage payments that they'd forgotten those payments were supposed to be temporary. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe they'd gotten a loan. Maybe they'd saved up from the restaurant profits. Maybe the car wasn't as expensive as I was imagining. But deep down, I knew. Deep down, I knew exactly what was happening, and it was going to hurt worse than I could imagine. Christmas morning arrived with the smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee, our family tradition since I was little. We gathered around the tree. In our pajamas, Mom and Dad looking relaxed and happy, Emma practically vibrating with excitement, and me trying to shake the feeling of impending doom. Emma opened her gifts first, as always. Each present brought squeals of delight. Designer handbags, jewelry, electronics, clothes with tags from stores I window shopped but couldn't afford. Then Dad stood up with that theatrical grin I'd seen the night before. "Emma," he said, dangling car keys with a shiny BMW keychain. "There's one more gift, but it's not under the tree." The scream Emma let out could have shattered windows. Emma's reaction to those car keys was something between a banshee wail and a lottery winner's celebration. She burst into tears, the happy kind, and launched herself at both parents like she'd just discovered she was the long-lost princess of some wealthy kingdom. "Are you serious right now?" she sobbed into Dad's shoulder. "Are you actually serious?" "Go look," Mom laughed, wiping her own emotional tears. We all trooped out to the garage where Dad had somehow managed to hide a gleaming white BMW with an enormous red bow stretched across the windshield. Not a used BMW, not a modest, practical BMW. A brand new, fresh off the lot still has that new car smell BMW. I did some quick mental math while Emma had what can only be described as a religious experience touching her new car. A new BMW. We're talking $40 maybe $50,000, possibly more depending on the options. "This is from both of us," Mom said, her arm around Emma's shoulders. "You've been so responsible lately, so mature. We're proud of you." Responsible, mature. Emma, who still lived at home rent-free, whose idea of a major expense was a $30 dinner, who'd never once offered to help with any family financial obligations. That Emma was responsible and mature. Meanwhile, I'd been paying half their bills for 3 years and got called responsible when I managed to help out during their temporary crisis. The cognitive dissonance was making my head spin. "How much did this cost?" I asked, trying to sound casual and probably failing. "Don't worry about that," Dad said with a wave of his hand. "That's not important. What's important is seeing our little girl happy, not important. A car that cost more than most people's annual salary was not important, but my $1,400 monthly contribution to their mortgage was essential to their survival. Make it make sense." "No, really." "I'll wait." Emma was now sitting in the driver's seat adjusting mirrors and taking selfies. "This is literally the best day of my entire life," she announced. "I can't believe you guys did this. We've been planning it for months," Mom said proudly. "Saving up, researching, finding the perfect one. Saving up for months while I paid their mortgage." Thinking they were financially struggling, I stood there in the garage, surrounded by my family's joy and celebration, and felt something cold and heavy settle in my chest. Not anger yet. That would come later. This was something worse. This was the slow, dawning realization that I'd been played. "See," Dad called. "Your gifts are still under the tree. Don't want to forget about those, right?" My gifts, plural, which was optimistic. Back inside, I settled cross-legged by the tree while Emma continued gushing about her car in the background. There were 3 packages with my name on them, much smaller than Emma's pile, but wrapped in the same expensive paper. I opened the largest one first. Inside was a picture frame, generic plastic, still in its original packaging with a clearance sticker showing it had been marked down from $12 to $4.99. The kind of thing you grab at the last minute when you realize you forgot someone. "For your apartment," Mom said brightly. "I thought you could use something nice to display your photos." Something nice. A $5 clearance frame was something nice for the daughter who'd been sending them over $50,000 in mortgage payments. The second package contained a candle, vanilla-scented, also clearly from the clearance section with multiple markdown stickers, creating a little price history timeline. Original price $15. Final price $349. "For ambience," Dad added helpfully. The third gift was where things got really special. I unwrapped it slowly, already knowing this wasn't going to redeem the situation. Inside was a pair of socks, plain white athletic socks, with the original price tag still attached in the corner where they thought I wouldn't notice it. $2.99. I held up the socks, the price tag catching the morning light like a little beacon of thoughtfulness. My family had just given my sister a car worth more than my annual salary, and the YD gotten me clearance socks without even bothering to remove the evidence of how little they'd spent. But the real kicker was coming. "Be humble," Mom said, that patronizing smile spreading across her face like she was delivering profound wisdom. "Each one receives what they deserve. Each one receives what they deserve." The words hit me like a physical slap. Dad chuckled appreciatively. Emma, still clutching her BMW keys, burst into laughter. My own family laughing at me on Christmas morning. After 3 years of me keeping their house out of foreclosure, I sat there holding $2 socks with the price tag still on, listening to my family laugh at the idea that this was what I deserved, and something inside me just snapped. I didn't say anything in that moment. What could I say? "Hey, remember how I'd been paying your mortgage for 3 years while you saved up for Emma's luxury car?" Somehow that felt like it would ruin the festive Christmas mood they were all enjoying at my expense. Instead, I smiled. "Thanks. These will be perfect." The rest of Christmas Day passed in a blur of forced conversation and fake enthusiasm. Emma couldn't stop talking about her car, the leather seats, the sound system, her plans for road trips. Mom and Dad basked in the glow of their generous gift-giving, accepting congratulations from relatives who called throughout the day. We just wanted to do something special for Emma. I heard Mom telling Aunt Karen on the phone, "She's been working so hard and she deserves something nice." Working so hard at her part-time retail job that barely covered her shopping budget while I worked full-time and sent half my paycheck home every month. I excused myself to help with dinner preparations, mostly so I could have a few minutes alone in the kitchen to process what had just happened. But every time I thought I had my emotions under control, I'd hear Emma squealing about her car in the next room or see Dad's satisfied expression as he accepted praise for his parenting skills. That evening, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. For 3 years, I'd been telling myself that my family appreciated my sacrifice, that they understood what I was giving up to help them, that this was temporary and things would eventually go back to normal. But the Christmas gifts had revealed the truth. In their minds, I was the family bank account. Emma was the beloved daughter who deserved luxury cars and celebration. I was the responsible one who helped out because that's what responsible people do. I thought about every dinner where they'd complained about money while I picked up the check. Every phone call where they'd mentioned being tight until next month while I stressed about my own bills. Every time I'd wanted something for myself, but held back because I needed to send money home. They hadn't been struggling, they'd been saving for Emma's car while I paid their mortgage. At 2:17 a.m., I got up and got dressed. I couldn't sleep anyway, and I had something important to do. I went to my father's home office and pulled out 3 years' worth of bank statements from my wallet. Every single automatic transfer to their account highlighted in yellow marker from when I'd been tracking my expenses. $51,400 every month like clockwork for 36 months. I paperclipped them together and wrote a note on top. "If you have money to buy Emma a BMW, I assume you can handle your own mortgage payments. The transfers stop now. Merry Christmas." I left the stack of statements on the kitchen counter right next to the coffee maker they'd bought with money they supposedly didn't have. Then I packed my bags. Not dramatically, not in anger, just methodically putting my belongings into my suitcase. I took the ridiculous gifts they'd given me. Might as well get some use out of those $2 socks. As I wheeled my suitcase to the car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Lightness, like a weight I'd been carrying for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. My phone started buzzing before I'd even reached the highway. I turned it off and kept driving. Back to my apartment, back to my life, back to keeping 100% of my paycheck for the first time since I'd started this job. The woman who'd been paying 2 mortgages while getting clearance Christmas gifts was gone. The woman driving home at 3 a.m. on Christmas night was someone new. Someone who'd finally learned the difference between helping family and being used by family. And honestly, it felt pretty damn good. Have you ever experienced that moment when you realize you've been taken advantage of for way too long? Let me know in the comments because what happened next was even more revealing about who my family really was. My phone had 37 missed calls by the time I turned it back on Christmas afternoon. 37, either someone had died or my family had discovered my little gift under the coffee maker. The voicemail started apologetic and quickly escalated to furious. Mom's voice progressed from tearful confusion. "Honey, we found your note and we're just so confused about what you mean to angry accusations. Sienna, this is completely uncalled for and frankly embarrassing to what sounded like genuine panic. Please call us back. We need to discuss this like adults." Dad's messages were more controlled but somehow more condescending. He acknowledged that maybe they should have been more thoughtful about the gift disparity, but emphasized that my reaction was disproportionate and concerning. Classic dad, making my response to their behavior the real problem. But it was Emma's messages that really showed me who my family was. Sienna, what the hell is wrong with you? Do you know what you've done to mom and dad? They're freaking out. Just because you're jealous of my car doesn't mean you can destroy Christmas. This is so incredibly selfish. I can't even believe it. Call me back right now. Jealous of her car. Selfish. Me, the person who'd been bankrolling their lifestyle for 3 years while living like a broke college student. The texts were even more enlightening. Dad, we need to talk immediately. This tantrum needs to stop. Mom, I don't understand where this anger is coming from. After everything we've done for you, Emma, you've ruined everything. I hope you're happy. Emma, again, Mom's been crying all day. Dad can't eat. Great job breaking up the family over money. And my personal favorite, Emma, we all know you make good money. Why are you being so stingy about helping family? Stingy. About $51,000 that I'd sent them while paying my own mortgage and living on ramen noodles. I spent Boxing Day in my apartment, ignoring the constant stream of calls and messages and doing something I hadn't done in 3 years, planning what to do with my money. First stop, the car dealership. Do you know what it's like to walk into a showroom when you can actually afford what you're looking at? When you're not doing mental gymnastics about mortgage payments and family obligations. It's intoxicating. I didn't go crazy. I'm not my family after all. But I bought myself a reliable, comfortable car with working air conditioning and doors that actually opened. Nothing fancy, but mine. Paid for with money I'd earned and kept for myself. The salesman was congratulating me on my purchase when my phone rang. Mom again. Sienna, please pick up. We've been trying to reach you for 2 days. We need to talk about this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. That's what we were calling 3 years of financial manipulation now. I let it go to voicemail and drove my new car home. Windows down, music up, feeling more like myself than I had in years. The messages kept coming. Family friends calling to check on me and express concern about my sudden change in behavior. Relatives I barely spoke to suddenly worried about my mental health and family relationships. Apparently, my parents had launched a full public relations campaign, painting themselves as the victims of their ungrateful daughters. Inexplicable cruelty. The narrative was simple. Sienna had a good job and was being selfish about helping family during difficult times. What they didn't mention in their sob story was the BMW or the 3 years of mortgage payments or the fact that their difficult times had apparently been profitable enough for major purchases. A week after Christmas, Emma showed up at my apartment complex. I saw her through my window standing by the building entrance looking smaller and less polished than usual. She'd been there for over an hour when I finally went downstairs. Your phone's been going straight to voicemail, she said. I blocked your numbers. She flinched. Sienna, we need to talk. This has gone too far, has it? Because from where I'm sitting, I just stopped enabling your family's financial irresponsibility. That seems like exactly far enough. Mom and Dad are devastated. They can't understand why you're so angry. I almost laughed. They can't understand why I'm angry that they bought you a $50,000 car while I've been paying their mortgage for 3 years. Emma's face went pale. They told me the car was a graduation gift they'd been saving for. With what money, Emma? They've been taking $1,400 from me every month for 36 months. Where did they get BMW money? She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. I didn't know about the mortgage payments. Of course, you didn't because you never asked where the money came from. You just enjoyed the benefits. That's when Emma started crying. Not the dramatic tears she used for manipulation. Genuine, ugly, confused crying. I really didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't realize you were paying for anything. Maybe she didn't. Maybe my parents had kept her in the dark about their financial arrangements with me. Or maybe she just hadn't wanted to look too closely at why her parents could afford to buy her expensive gifts while claiming they needed help with basic expenses. Either way, the damage was done. The Emma stood there crying in my apartment lobby. And for a moment, I felt sorry for her. She was 24, had been sheltered and spoiled her entire life, and was just now realizing that her princess lifestyle had been funded by her sister's sacrifice. What do you want me to do, Emma? I don't know, she sobbed. Come home, talk to them, work this out. We're family. We're family, the magic phrase that was supposed to make everything okay. The same phrase that had kept me sending money for 3 years while they treated me like hired help. Emma, do you know what I gave up to pay their mortgage? She shook her head, still crying. I've been eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch and shopping at thrift stores for 3 years. I've turned down vacations with friends, dates, opportunities to build my own life because I was supporting theirs. I've been living like a broke college student while making six figures because I thought my family needed help, but they did need help. The restaurant was struggling. The restaurant was struggling 3 years ago. What's their excuse for the last 2 years or for this year when they had BMW money? Emma didn't have an answer for that. Look, I said, feeling suddenly exhausted. I don't hate you. I don't even hate mom and dad, but I'm not going back to being the family ATM. I'm not going back to sacrificing my future so everyone else can live comfortably. What if we paid you back? I almost laughed. With what money? You work part-time retail. Mom and dad just spent 50 grand on your car. We could sell the car. Could you, Emma? Could you really give up your BMW and go back to taking the bus? Her silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. I went back upstairs, leaving Emma in the lobby. Through my window, I watched her sit on the bench outside for another hour before finally calling someone to pick her up. Over the next few weeks, the family pressure campaign intensified. Relatives called to tell me I was being unreasonable. Family friends expressed disappointment in my behavior. Even my grandmother got involved, using her age and fragile health as emotional leverage. Sienna, dear, family is all we have in this world. Don't let pride destroy what's most important. Pride. Wanting basic respect from people I'd been financially supporting was pride. But here's the thing about cutting off toxic people. Even when they're family, even when everyone tells you you're wrong, your life gets better almost immediately. With no mortgage payment going out to my parents, I suddenly had money. Real money. Money for emergencies, for fun, for building the life I'd been putting on hold for 3 years. I bought furniture for my apartment. Actual grown-up furniture, not the second-hand college stuff I'd been making do with. I went grocery shopping without calculating every purchase. I made dinner plans with friends without having to check my account balance first. I booked a vacation, a real vacation, not a weekend camping trip or staying with relatives. 7 days in Costa Rica, staying at a resort I'd seen in magazines and thought I'd never afford. It was glorious, but the best part wasn't the money. The best part was the peace. No more stress about family emergencies. No more guilt about wanting things for myself. No more walking on eggshells around people who saw me as a resource rather than a daughter. For the first time in 3 years, I was living my own life instead of subsidizing everyone else's. And you know what? I was really, really good at it. My phone still buzzed occasionally with messages from blocked numbers, family members trying new tactics to reach me. But I'd learned something important. I didn't owe anyone access to my life, my money, or my emotional energy just because we shared DNA. Some bridges are worth burning if the alternative is setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I was done being kindling for my family's comfort. 6 months after Christmas, I was a completely different person. Not in a dramatic movie makeover way, but in all the small daily ways that actually matter. I woke up excited about my day instead of anxious about money. I bought coffee from the expensive place near work instead of making instant at home. I said yes to dinner invitations, weekend trips, and spontaneous plans. Turns out when you're not supporting 3 other adults, you can actually afford to live like the successful professional you are. Who knew? My apartment had transformed into something from a design magazine, real artwork on the walls, plants that were still alive, a kitchen stocked with actual ingredients instead of just ramen and canned soup. I'd hosted dinner parties, book club meetings, and even a small birthday celebration for myself, something I hadn't done in years because I couldn't afford to feed people properly. Work was better, too. Without the constant financial stress, I was more creative, more focused, more willing to take on challenging projects. My boss had noticed the change and hinted at upcoming promotion opportunities. Apparently, not worrying about family financial emergencies makes you a better employee. I'd also started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'd gone on several dates with a guy named Michael who worked in software development. He was funny, smart, and refreshingly uncomplicated. When he offered to pay for dinner, I didn't immediately calculate whether I could afford to split the check. When he suggested a weekend trip, I didn't have to decline because of family obligations. It was amazing what happened when you prioritized your own life for once. The family calls had gradually decreased as it became clear I wasn't changing my mind. Emma had tried a few more times, but I think she was starting to understand that this wasn't a tantrum I'd get over. This was a permanent change in our family dynamic. Mom had left increasingly desperate voicemails before apparently giving up. Dad had tried the authoritative approach, then the guilt trip approach, then silence. Fine by me. I was enjoying a quiet Saturday morning, reading in my beautiful living room with coffee from my fancy machine, when someone knocked on my door, not the doorbell. Actual knocking, urgent and persistent. Through the peephole, I saw Emma. She looked different again, thinner, tired, wearing clothes that had seen better days. No sign of the polished princess I'd known all her life. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "Before you say anything," she said quickly, "I know you don't want to see me, but I need to tell you something, and I can't do it over the phone." She looked genuinely upset. Not manipulative tears, but real distress. "What's wrong? Can I come in, please?" I stepped aside and she walked into my living room like she was seeing it for the first time. Her eyes lingered on the new furniture, the artwork, the general sense of prosperity that I'd been able to create once I stopped funding everyone else's lifestyle. "Nice place," she said, but there was no resentment in her voice. Just acknowledgement. "Emma, what's going on?" She sat heavily on my couch, suddenly looking much older than her 24 years. "They had to give the car back." I felt my stomach drop. "What?" "The BMW. They couldn't make the payments. It got repossessed last week." Of course. They'd financed a car they couldn't afford, probably counting on my continued mortgage payments to make the monthly bills manageable. When I stopped sending money, their house of cards collapsed. "Emma, I'm sorry, but that's not why I'm here," she interrupted. "I mean, it is, but not the way you think." She took a shaky breath. "Sienna, they're going to lose the house." The words hung between us like a death sentence. Despite everything, despite the anger and hurt and betrayal, the thought of my parents losing their home hit me like a physical blow. "How bad is it?" 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent papers. They have until the end of next month to bring it current. Or, she trailed off. 3 months behind. I'd stopped the transfers in December, which meant they'd immediately fallen behind again without my payments. They hadn't gotten back on their feet financially. They'd just been using my money to stay afloat while spending their own income on luxury items. What's their plan? Emma looked at me like I'd asked her to explain quantum physics. Their plan? Sienna, you are their plan. You were always their plan. The honesty of it was breathtaking. I hadn't been helping family through a rough patch. I'd been permanently subsidizing their lifestyle so they could afford things they wanted instead of things they needed. "And what's your plan to help them, Emma?" "My plan?" She seemed genuinely confused by the question. "I don't have any money. I lost my job 2 weeks ago." "You lost your job. Budget cuts. And with the car gone, I can't get to most of the places that are hiring." She looked around my apartment again. "I've been staying with friends, but I can't do that forever." So, Emma was unemployed and effectively homeless. My parents were facing foreclosure, and somehow this was all supposed to be my responsibility to fix. The audacity was almost impressive. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below because this family's ability to create chaos was about to reach new heights. I sat there processing Emma's words while she waited expectantly for me to what exactly? Write a check? Welcome them all into my apartment? Resume the financial support that had kept them afloat while they made terrible decisions? "Emma," I said carefully, "what do you think I should do about this situation?" "I think you should help your family," she said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Help how?" "Resume the mortgage payments just temporarily until they figure something else out." Temporarily. The same word they'd used 3 years ago when this whole mess started. "And how long is temporarily this time?" Emma shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. A few months, maybe a year. A year of me paying their mortgage while they figure out their finances." "It's not like you can't afford it," she said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "You clearly have money now." She gestured around my apartment. There it was. The core belief that had driven this whole situation. Because I earned good money, my family felt entitled to it. Because I could afford to help, I was obligated to help indefinitely, regardless of how they treated me or what I gave up in the process. "Emma, do you know what this apartment looked like 6 months ago?" She shook her head. "Like a college dorm room, second-hand furniture, no decorations, barely any food in the kitchen. I was living like I made minimum wage while sending you guys the difference. But that was your choice. Was it because every time I tried to talk about stopping the payments, you guys made me feel guilty for even thinking about it? Every family gathering, I heard about how tight money was, how much you appreciated my help, how family has to stick together." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I really didn't know about the mortgage payments," she said finally. "But you knew about everything else. You knew I never bought new clothes or went on trips or had nice things. You knew I was always careful about money while you spent freely. Did you ever wonder why? I thought you were just responsible." Responsible. The family code word for the one who sacrifices so everyone else can have what they want. "Emma, your parents spent $50,000 on a car for you while I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch because I was paying their mortgage. Does that sound reasonable to you?" She started crying again. I know it sounds bad when you put it like that. It sounds bad because it is bad. It's not normal family behavior. It's financial abuse disguised as family loyalty. Financial abuse? Emma's voice rose. That's a little dramatic, don't you think? Is it? They manipulated me into giving them money under false pretenses. They made me feel guilty for wanting to stop. They used emotional manipulation to keep me paying while they used that money to buy luxury items. What would you call it? Emma was quiet for a long time, presumably trying to reframe the situation in a way that didn't make her family look like the bad guys. So, you're just going to let them lose their house? She asked finally. Emma, I'm not letting them do anything. They made choices that led to this situation. They chose to finance a car they couldn't afford instead of getting their finances stable. They chose to rely on my income instead of living within their means. They chose to treat me like a bank account instead of a daughter. But there are parents. Yes, they are. And parents are supposed to support their children, not the other way around. Emma stood up abruptly, pacing my living room like a caged animal. So, what am I supposed to do? Just watch everything fall apart. You could get a job. I told you I lost my job. So get another one. There are buses, ride shares, people who need help. Figure it out like every other adult who doesn't have family funding their lifestyle. Emma stared at me like I'd suggested she move to Mars. The idea that she might have to solve her own problems, find her own solutions, support herself like most 24-year-olds, seemed genuinely shocking to her. And that's when I realized just how badly my parents had failed both of us. They'd taught Emma that she deserved everything without earning it. And they'd taught me that my value came from what I could provide rather than who I was. They'd created one daughter who couldn't function independently and one daughter who couldn't stop functioning for everyone else. Sienna, please, Emma said, her voice breaking. I know we messed up. I know we took advantage of you, but we're family. We can fix this. How, Emma? How exactly would we fix this? I resumed the mortgage payments you and Mom and Dad promised to do better. And then what? In a year when you're struggling again, we have the same conversation. It would be different this time. Why? What's changed? Are Mom and Dad suddenly going to start living within their means? Are you suddenly going to become financially responsible? Is everyone going to stop seeing me as the family ATM? Emma couldn't answer that question because we both knew nothing had changed except they'd run out of other options. I need you to leave, I said quietly. Sienna, Emma, I need you to leave my apartment and figure out your own life. And I need Mom and Dad to face the consequences of their choices without expecting me to rescue them again. She gathered her things slowly, clearly hoping I'd change my mind. At the door, she turned back one more time. When they're living in their car, remember that you chose money over family. The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting, but it was also revealing. Even now facing homelessness and financial ruin, my family couldn't acknowledge that their choices had led to this situation. It was easier to blame me for not rescuing them than to accept responsibility for their own decisions. After Emma left, I sat in my quiet apartment feeling a mix of sadness and relief. Sad for the family relationships that had been damaged beyond repair, but relieved that I'd finally stopped enabling their dysfunction. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people face the natural consequences of their actions. Even when those people are family, even when it breaks your heart to watch. 2 months passed without any contact from my family. I threw myself into work, took that promotion my boss had been hinting about, and tried not to think about what was happening with the house. Some days I succeeded better than others. Michael and I had been dating for 3 months now, and he was the first person I'd told the whole story to, not just the surface version. My family and I had a disagreement about money, but the real story with all its uncomfortable details. You did the right thing, he said over dinner one evening. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, even when those people are family. Especially when those people are family. They're supposed to want what's best for you, not what's most convenient for them. It was exactly what I needed to hear, but it didn't make the guilt disappear entirely. Somewhere out there, my parents were facing financial ruin, and I had the power to prevent it. The fact that preventing it would mean returning to a toxic dynamic didn't make the knowledge any easier to carry. That's when the knock came on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Michael wasn't supposed to come over until later. Through the peephole, I saw a figure I recognized, but had never seen looking so small and defeated. Mom. She stood in my hallway holding what looked like a manila envelope. Her clothes rumpled, her hair less perfectly styled than I'd ever seen it. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the 6 months since Christmas. Against every instinct telling me not to get involved, I opened the door. Sienna. Her voice was broken. Thank you for seeing me. I almost didn't. I know. I wouldn't blame you if you'd left me standing here. She gestured to the envelope. I brought something to show you. Can I come in for just a few minutes? Every cell in my body was screaming not to let her into my space, not to risk getting pulled back into the dysfunction I'd worked so hard to escape. But she looked so genuinely defeated that my curiosity won over my self-preservation. 5 minutes, I said, stepping aside. Mom walked into my living room and stopped short, taking in the changes I'd made. The furniture, the artwork, the general sense of prosperity and peace that filled the space. It's beautiful, she said softly. You've built a beautiful life. Thank you. She sat carefully on the edge of my couch, still clutching the envelope like a lifeline. We received the final foreclosure notice. Even though I'd been expecting it, the words hit like a physical blow when, last week, the bank, she trailed off, shaking her head. We have 30 days to vacate. Where are you staying? With your Aunt Margaret. She has a guest room. Mom's voice was flat, emotionless. She's made it very clear that it's temporary. Aunt Margaret, who'd never hesitated to share her opinions about other people's financial decisions. I could only imagine how she was handling having her broke sister and brother-in-law move into her spare room. Mom, why are you here? She opened the envelope and pulled out what looked like medical bills. Your father had a heart attack 3 weeks ago. The world tilted. What? The stress, the doctor said. The stress of losing everything, of feeling like he'd failed as a provider. She handed me the papers. These are the hospital bills. The insurance covered most of it. But I looked at the numbers. Even with insurance, the remaining balance was substantial. Thousands of dollars they obviously didn't have. Is he okay? He's alive, but he can't work right now. And even when he can, she shrugged helplessly. The restaurant is gone, too. We couldn't keep up with the rent after losing the house. So, Dad was sick. They were living with relatives. They'd lost both their home and their business. And now they had medical bills they couldn't pay. The complete collapse I'd feared was now reality. Mom, I'm sorry about Dad. I really am. But if you're here to ask me to, I'm not, she interrupted. I'm not here to ask you for money. That surprised me. Then why are you here? Mom was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. I'm here to ask if you'll let us stay on your health insurance. Health insurance. Not money, not mortgage payments, not financial rescue, just health insurance. Your job has family coverage, right? We could pay you back for the difference in premiums. It would just be until we get back on our feet. I studied my mother's face looking for signs of manipulation or emotional blackmail, but all I saw was exhaustion and genuine desperation. This wasn't the woman who'd laughed at my Christmas gifts or justified spending my money on luxury items. This was someone who'd lost everything and was trying to figure out how to survive. What about Emma? Emma found a job. It's not much, but she's working. She's learning to take care of herself. Mom's voice carried a note of something that might have been pride. She said you were right about her needing to grow up. Emma was working. Actually supporting herself instead of expecting family to cover her expenses. That was something at least. Mom, adding you to my health insurance would cost me about $300 a month. We can pay you back. Not right away, but eventually. I'll sign papers, make it official, whatever you need. $300 a month. It was manageable, not like the $1,400 I'd been paying before. And it was for something essential, not luxury items or lifestyle maintenance, but it was also a slippery slope back into financial entanglement with people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted with my generosity. I need time to think about it, I said. Mom nodded, standing slowly. I understand, but Sienna, she paused at the door. I know we hurt you. I know we took advantage of your kindness and treated you unfairly. We were wrong about so many things. An acknowledgement, not a full apology, but an acknowledgement that they'd been wrong. It was more than I'd ever gotten before. I'll think about it, I repeated. After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment trying to process what had just happened. My family had lost everything. Their house, their business, their financial security. Dad was sick. They were living with relatives. And Mom was asking for the bare minimum to keep them from complete destitution. Part of me felt vindicated. They'd finally faced the consequences of their choices. Learned that actions have outcomes. Discovered what life was like without my financial support. But another part of me just felt sad. These were still my parents, whatever our history. And watching them lose everything, even when it was the result of their own decisions, wasn't as satisfying as I'd thought it would be. The question was, did helping them with health insurance mean I was being compassionate? Or did it mean I was getting sucked back into a cycle of enabling that would ultimately hurt us all? I had until tomorrow to decide. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, weighing options and consequences. Health insurance wasn't the same as mortgage payments. It was medical necessity, not lifestyle support, but it was also a monthly financial connection to people who'd proven they saw me as a resource rather than a daughter. By morning, I'd made my decision. I called Mom's cell phone. She answered on the first ring. "I'll add you to my health insurance," I said without preamble. "But there are conditions." "Anything. What do you need?" "This is temporary. 6 months maximum. That gives you time to find your own coverage or get Dad healthy enough to work again." 6 months. "Yes, that's reasonable. You pay me the difference in premiums every month. No exceptions. No sob stories about not having the money. If you can't pay, you find other coverage." "I understand. And Mom, this doesn't change anything else between us. Adding you to my insurance doesn't mean I'm resuming financial support or rebuilding our relationship. It just means I'm not heartless enough to let you go without medical care." There was a long pause. "I understand that, too. One more thing. If you or Dad or Emma ever treats this like I owe you anything more, if any of you ever uses this generosity to guilt me into additional help, the coverage stops immediately. No warnings, no second chances." "Sienna." Mom's voice was quiet. "We understand and thank you. This means more than you know." After I hung up, I called my HR department to add dependents to my health plan. The additional cost would be $280 per month. Not the $300 I'd estimated, but close enough. I set up an automatic reminder to collect payment from Mom every month. It felt weird having financial contact with my family again, even for something legitimate like health insurance. But it also felt different than before. This wasn't me carrying their lifestyle or enabling their poor choices. This was a specific limited arrangement with clear boundaries and expectations. 2 weeks later, Emma called. Not from a blocked number or someone else's phone. Her own number appeared on my screen for the first time in months. "Sienna, it's Emma. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "I suppose. I wanted to thank you for the health insurance thing. Mom told me what you did. It's temporary." "I know. And I wanted you to know I got a job. A real job full-time, and they said I'll get benefits after my probationary period ends. It's not glamorous, but it's steady income and I can take care of myself." That was genuinely surprising. "Good for you, Emma." I also wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not just because I want something from you. I understand now what we did to you, how we used you, how unfair it all was. Okay, I know you probably don't believe me, and I don't blame you, but living on my own, paying my own bills, figuring out how to survive without family money, it's opened my eyes to what you were dealing with for 3 years. Emma's voice had a quality I'd never heard before, genuine humility mixed with something that might have been respect. "I'm glad you're learning to take care of yourself. Sienna, can I ask you something? And you can totally say no. Here it comes." I thought the real reason for the call. "What? Would you be willing to have coffee with me sometime? Not to talk about family stuff or ask for anything, just to see if we can figure out how to be sisters without all the toxic dynamics." Sisters without toxic dynamics. I hadn't even known that was possible with my family. "Maybe," I said. "Someday. When I'm ready." "That's fair. I'll wait until you're ready." After Emma hung up, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in my adult life, I was having conversations with family members where I wasn't being asked to rescue, support, or enable anyone, where my boundaries were being respected instead of tested. It was a strange feeling. Michael came over that evening and I told him about the health insurance arrangement and Emma's call. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, conflicted. Part of me is proud that I found a way to help without sacrificing myself. Part of me is terrified that I'm getting sucked back into their dysfunction. "What does your gut tell you?" I thought about it. My gut says this is different. The health insurance is legitimate. It's limited and it has clear boundaries. Emma's job and her attitude both seem genuine. Maybe they've actually learned something from losing everything. And if they haven't, then I pull back again. But Michael, I can't live my whole life assuming the worst about people, even people who've hurt me before. At some point, I have to decide whether I want to build a life based on fear or based on healthy boundaries. 3 months later, Dad was cleared to return to work. He'd found a job managing someone else's restaurant, not owning his own anymore, but steady income with health benefits. Mom had gotten part-time work doing bookkeeping for local businesses. They moved out of Aunt Margaret's house and into a small apartment they could actually afford. Emma was still working, still supporting herself, still learning what independence looked like, and I was still living my own life, keeping my boundaries intact, but no longer carrying the weight of anger and resentment that had been consuming me for months. The family dynamics hadn't magically healed. We weren't having weekly dinners or holiday celebrations, but we'd found a way to coexist that didn't require me to sacrifice my well-being for their comfort. It wasn't the relationship I'd once wanted with my family, but it was a relationship I could live with. Sometimes that's enough. 6 months to the day after I'd added my parents to my health insurance, Dad got his new job's benefits package. He called me himself to let me know they'd be switching to his employer's plan at the end of the month. "Sienna," he said, his voice carrying a formality that hadn't been there before our family imploded. "I wanted to give you proper notice about the insurance change and to thank you for carrying us through this difficult time. Carrying us through, not helping out or doing what family does, but carrying them through a crisis of their own making." The honesty of the phrasing was refreshing. "You're welcome, Dad. I'm glad things are working out. They are slowly, but they are." He paused. "Sienna, I know we have a lot to work through as a family. I know trust was broken and damage was done, but I want you to know that your mother and I have been talking about what went wrong, what we did wrong, and how we want to move forward. Okay, we'd like to take you to dinner sometime, not to ask for anything, not to discuss family business, just to spend time with our daughter and hear about your life." It was such a simple request, but coming from my parents, it felt revolutionary. Wanting to spend time with me for my own sake, not because they needed something from me. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself. "Maybe next month when your insurance transition is complete and things settle down." A month later, we met at a modest restaurant. Not the expensive place they might have chosen when they were living beyond their means, but a comfortable neighborhood spot with good food and reasonable prices. They looked different, older, obviously, but also more real somehow. Mom's clothes were nice, but clearly not designer. Dad seemed more relaxed despite everything they'd been through. Like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "You look good," Mom said as we settled into our booth. "Happy? I am happy. Tell us about work. We heard you got promoted." So, I did. I told them about my new role, the projects I was managing, the team I'd built. They listened without immediately calculating how my success could benefit them, without making suggestions about how I should spend my money. They told me about their new jobs, their small apartment, the budget they'd created to live within their means. Dad talked about the relief of not owning a business, of having steady income without the constant stress of making payroll and managing overhead. "We were in over our heads for years," he admitted, too proud to downsize, too stubborn to admit we needed to change our lifestyle. "It took losing everything to realize that we'd been building our lives on a foundation of borrowed money and borrowed time." "What's different now?" I asked. "Everything." Mom said, "We live in a place we can afford with furniture we own outright. We drive used cars that are paid for. We go out to dinner once a week instead of 3 times. We budget for everything and don't spend money we don't have. It's actually less stressful," Dad added, "knowing that our bills are covered, that we're not gambling on future income to pay current expenses. I sleep better now than I did when we owned the big house." Emma joined us for dessert, looking more mature and confident than I'd ever seen her. She'd been promoted at work, moved into her own apartment, and was taking evening classes to finish her degree. "I'm learning to cook," she announced proudly. "Actual cooking, not just heating up frozen dinners. Last week, I made lasagna from scratch." "How very domestic of you," I said with a small smile. "I know, right? Who would have thought?" Emma grinned. "Turns out being responsible is actually kind of satisfying. I never knew because I'd never tried it before." After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Mom pulled me aside. "Sienna, I need to say something I should have said months ago. I'm sorry. Not sorry that we got caught or sorry that there were consequences, but sorry for what we did to you. Sorry for using you, for taking advantage of your generosity, for treating you like a bank account instead of our daughter." It was the apology I'd been waiting for without realizing it. "Thank you for saying that. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, but I hope someday we can build something new, something healthier." "I'd like that too," I said, meaning it. Driving home that night, I reflected on how far we'd all come. My parents had learned to live within their means and stopped seeing me as their financial safety net. Emma had discovered independence and self-reliance, and I had learned the difference between helping family and enabling dysfunction. We weren't the close, warm family I'd once imagined we could be. Too much damage had been done, too much trust broken, but we were something new. A family that respected boundaries, that valued independence, that didn't confuse love with financial obligation. A few weeks later, Emma and I had that coffee she'd asked about months earlier. We talked about books, movies, her job, my relationship with Michael. Normal sister stuff without the underlying tension of financial dynamics or family drama. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked as we prepared to leave, walking away on Christmas, forcing us all to face reality. I thought about it seriously. "No, I regret that it took so long. I regret that it had to get so bad before I found my backbone. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I'm glad you did, Emma said quietly. We all needed to learn how to stand on our own feet. We just didn't know it at the time. As I drove home from coffee with Emma, I realized that the angry, resentful woman who'd packed her bags at 2 a.m. on Christmas morning was gone. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, more confident in her own worth. Someone who understood that love doesn't require sacrifice. That family doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's dysfunction. I'd built a life I was proud of. Relationships based on mutual respect and a family dynamic that worked for everyone involved. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd once imagined, but it was real, honest, and sustainable. And for the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself while still caring about the people I loved. That Christmas morning 6 months ago, I'd thought I was losing my family, but I'd actually been saving us all. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is letting them face the consequences of their choices, even when that someone is family, even when it breaks your heart to watch. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength and building healthy boundaries. Remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish when the alternative is losing yourself entirely. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say,